The day my granddaughter Sophia laughed in my face was the day I decided to prove her wrong, not with anger or harsh words. I'm far too old for that kind of nonsense. But with something she never expected from her ancient grandmother. Success on her own playground. Grandma Jessica, you can barely text. What makes you think you can handle TikTok? She had snickered, not even trying to hide her amusement as she watched me struggle with my new smartphone. A gift from my son that I suspected was more about keeping tabs on me than any genuine desire to connect. It's for young people. You'll just embarrass yourself. The dismissal stung more than she knew. At 87, I've been dismissed plenty by doctors who speak over my head to whoever accompanied me to appointments, by cashiers who assume my shaking hands mean a shaking mind, by my own children who began making decisions for me, rather than with me, after Harold passed 5 years ago. But something about Sophia's laughter that afternoon in my sunlit kitchen, the kitchen where I'd taught her to bake cookies when she was so small she needed a stool to reach the counter, sparked something in me. Not anger, exactly. Determination. Perhaps you're right, dear, I said, keeping my voice light as I poured her more tea. But I've got nothing but time these days. And I've always been a quick study. She patted my hand with that particular blend of condescension and affection reserved for the very young and the very old. Sure, Grandma. Just don't tag me in anything, okay? I didn't tell her then what I was planning. I didn't mention that before she was born. I'd been a literature professor for 30 years, that I'd mastered 4 languages, that I'd published 3 books of poetry. I didn't remind her that I'd learned to use email in my 60s, Facebook in my 70s, and Instagram in my 80s. Instead, I simply smiled and changed the subject to her upcoming semester at college. But after she left, I picked up the phone she'd helped me set up and opened the colorful app with the musical note icon. Well, I said to the empty kitchen where Harold's ghost still seemed to linger some days, let's see what all the fuss is about. I couldn't have known then that this small act of rebellion would completely transform my life. That within 6 months, millions of people around the world would know my name. That brands would be fighting to work with me. That my own family would look at me with new eyes, some with newfound respect, others with unexpected resentment. I couldn't have known that at 87. I was about to begin the most unexpected chapter of my life. But perhaps that's the beauty of growing old. You've lived long enough to know that life never stops surprising you, if you're brave enough to let it. My name is Jessica Winters. I was born in 1937, when the world was on the brink of another terrible war. I've lived through rationing and revolutions, through civil rights movements and technological revolutions. I've buried a husband, raised 3 children, and welcomed 7 grandchildren into this world. My home is a modest 2-bedroom cottage on the outskirts of Boston, filled with books and memories. Harold and I bought it 40 years ago, when he retired from his engineering job. We'd planned to travel, but life had other ideas. His heart began to fail just as our adventures were supposed to begin. After Harold died, my children started treating me differently. My eldest son, Richard, began dropping by more often, usually with paperwork for me to sign. My daughter, Elizabeth, suddenly had opinions about everything from my medication schedule to what I should eat for dinner. My youngest, Thomas, at least had the decency to be straightforward. He thought I should sell the house and move into a community for active seniors. I refused. This house holds the echoes of my life with Harold. The garden where we spent summer evenings, the study where I wrote my books, the kitchen where we danced on our anniversary each year, even when his legs could barely hold him up. I wasn't ready to trade those ghosts for bingo nights and pudding cups, so we reached an uncomfortable stalemate. They worried, I resisted, and gradually our conversations became superficial. Weather, health, grandchildren, nothing that mattered. Except for Sophia, my brilliant tech-obsessed granddaughter who, despite her occasional condescension, still visited regularly. She was the one who convinced me to get a smartphone, so we can text Grandma, set up my social media accounts, so you can see my photos from college, and eventually, reluctantly, helped me download TikTok. Just so you know what I'm talking about, but seriously, don't try to make videos. What Sophia didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that beneath my wrinkles and white hair, I was still me, still curious, still stubborn, still hungry for life and learning and connection. The night after Sophia laughed at me, I stayed up until 2 a.m. watching TikTok videos, cooking tutorials, dance challenges, history lessons compressed into 60 seconds, young people sharing their lives, old people sharing their wisdom. I was mesmerized by the creativity, the humor, the raw humanity of it all. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, an idea began to form. What if I shared my story? Not just for my family, who had stopped listening years ago, but for whoever might be interested. What if I, Jessica Winters, 87 years old, and supposedly past her prime, had something to say that people might want to hear? Don't be ridiculous, I told myself as I finally turned off the phone and prepared for bed. You're too old for this nonsense. But as I drifted off to sleep, another voice whispered, you're exactly old enough for this nonsense. Learning TikTok was like learning to dance again, after decades of sitting still. Awkward, frustrating, occasionally humiliating, but also exhilarating. I started by watching hours upon hours of videos. I studied what made people stop scrolling, what made them comment, what made them share. I took notes in a leather-bound journal Harold had given me for our 40th anniversary, creating my own taxonomy of TikTok trends and techniques. After a week of research, I attempted my first video. A simple introduction. Hello, TikTok. I'm Jessica. I'm 87 years old, and I'm here because my granddaughter said I couldn't do it. Let's prove her wrong together. It took 17 attempts to get it right. My hands shook. The lighting was terrible. I kept forgetting what I wanted to say, but finally, I had something that seemed acceptable. Not perfect, but authentic. I pressed post before I could change my mind. Then I waited and waited. By evening, the video had 12 views and 0 comments. I felt foolish. What was I thinking? That I'd become an overnight sensation? That anyone would care what an old woman had to say? I almost deleted the app that night, but something stopped me. Perhaps the same stubborn streak that had kept me in my house, despite my children's objections. Instead, I made another video. This time, I shared a story about meeting Harold in 1958 at a protest against nuclear testing. We were fighting for your future, I told the camera. Even though we didn't know you yet, the next morning I had comments. Not many, but enough to make my heart race. Wait, you were an activist in the 50s? That's so cool. My grandparents never talk about their past like this. Please share more stories, Jessica. So I did. I talked about the teaching literature during the Vietnam War, when my classroom became a place for students to process their grief and rage. I shared recipes passed down through generations of my family, demonstrating them in my kitchen with my arthritic hands. I read poems, mine and others, that had sustained me through dark times. Gradually, my audience grew. 50 followers, 100, 500. Most were young, Sophia's age or younger. But there were older faces too. People who remembered the world I was describing. People who, like me, felt invisible in a youth-obsessed culture. What surprised me most was how much I enjoyed it. The creativity, the connection, the challenge of distilling decades of experience into bite-sized pieces that might resonate with someone I'd never meet. 1 month in, Sophia called. "Grandma," she said, her voice a mixture of confusion and reluctant admiration. "Why didn't you tell me you were on TikTok? My roommate just showed me your video about your arrest at that civil rights march. You have like 1,000 followers." "Oh," I said innocently. I thought you weren't interested in being tagged in my content." Her laugh this time wasn't dismissive. It was genuine. "Touché, Grandma. Touché." The trouble began when my son Richard discovered my new hobby. Not through Sophia. She'd kept my secret, perhaps out of newfound respect. But through his wife, who'd stumbled across one of my videos that had unexpectedly reached 50,000 views. It was a simple story about how Harold and I had navigated a year of separation during his military service, communicating only through letters. Richard called immediately. "Mom, what are you doing? Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" "Dangerous?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "I'm just telling stories, Richard. To strangers on the internet. You're sharing personal details about your life, about our family. Have you thought about privacy? About security? About scammers who target the elderly?" His concern might have been touching if it hadn't been so patronizing. "I'm not sharing our bank account numbers, Richard. I'm sharing memories. You need to take those videos down," he insisted. "Or at least let me review them before you post anything else." That was when I felt the first flicker of real anger. "I'm 87, not 8. I don't need your permission or approval." The call ended badly. Richard threatened to speak to his siblings to figure out what to do about this situation. As if I were a problem to be solved, rather than a person making her own choices. True to his word, within days, all 3 of my children arrived for an intervention. They sat in my living room, Richard stern and worried, Elizabeth nervously twisting her wedding ring, Thomas checking his watch every few minutes, as if he had somewhere more important to be. "We're concerned, Mom," Elizabeth began, clearly the designated spokesperson. "We know you're enjoying this TikTok thing, but we're worried about your safety and your privacy. And frankly," Thomas added, "it's a little undignified. Some of those videos are personal." I looked at each of them in turn. These adults who had once been small enough to carry in my arms. When had they decided they knew better than me? When had they stopped seeing me as a whole person? "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully. "But this is my choice, my life, my stories to tell." Richard leaned forward. "Mom, we're thinking that maybe it's time to reconsider the living situation here. If you're feeling isolated enough that you need to seek connection from strangers online." "I'm not isolated," I interrupted. "I have friends. I have interests. I have a life that I enjoy. But you're alone in this house," Elizabeth said softly. "And now you're putting yourself at risk online. We're worried that you're not making sound decisions anymore." The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. They thought I was losing my faculties, that my digital adventure wasn't a choice but a symptom. "I think," I said, rising from my chair with as much dignity as my arthritic knees allowed, "that this conversation is over. Thank you for your concern, but I am perfectly capable of managing my own life." They left reluctantly, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. This wasn't over. They were planning something, and whatever it was, I doubted I would like it. That night, I made a new video. I didn't mention the confrontation directly, but I spoke about the infantilization of the elderly, about how society, even well-meaning family members, often confuses physical aging with cognitive decline. Respect doesn't have an expiration date, I told my now 5,000 followers. Neither does autonomy. The comment section exploded. "Preach, Jessica! My mom is going through the same thing with my siblings." This made me rethink how I treat my grandparents. "You're my hero." Seriously. I went to bed that night with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. I'd found my voice again, but I feared the consequences. What would my children do next? And was I prepared to stand my ground, whatever came? As the tension with my children simmered, my TikTok presence exploded. The video about elderly autonomy struck a nerve, not just with older viewers, but with younger ones who saw their own grandparents in my situation. It was shared thousands of times, and suddenly my follower count jumped from 5,000 to 25,000 in a single week. I developed a routine. Each morning, coffee in hand, I'd plan my content for the day. Sometimes it was storytelling, anecdotes from my teaching days or travels with Harold. Sometimes it was commentary on current events, filtered through the lens of someone who had witnessed nearly 9 decades of history. Occasionally, I'd participate in trending challenges, modified for my abilities but no less enthusiastic. What seemed to resonate most, though, were my life lessons videos, short, thoughtful reflections on what I'd learned through living, about love, loss, resilience, and joy. I spoke candidly about Harold's death and the grief that still occasionally ambushed me. I talked about regrets and second chances. I shared the wisdom that only comes from making mistakes and surviving them. Comments poured in. I lost my husband last year and thought my life was over. You're showing me it isn't. I'm saving these videos to watch when I'm going through hard times. You're the grandmother I never had. The connection was intoxicating. For years after retirement, I'd felt increasingly invisible. A common experience for elderly women in particular. Now, strangers from across the world were not only seeing me, but valuing what I had to say. 3 months into my TikTok journey, something unexpected happened. A video of mine went truly viral. Not just within my growing community, but across the platform. It was a simple reflection on finding purpose at different stages of life, filmed in my garden as the sun set behind me. At 20, I thought purpose meant changing the world, I'd said. At 40, I thought it meant raising good children. At 60, I thought it meant leaving a legacy. Now, at 87, I understand that purpose is simpler and more profound. It's being fully present in whatever life gives you. Whether that's a revolution or a quiet cup of tea on your porch, the size of your impact doesn't matter. Your presence in each moment does. Within days, the video had over 1 million views. My follower count surpassed 100,000. News websites wrote articles with headlines like, 87-year-old TikTok philosopher captures hearts worldwide. A producer from a morning talk show emailed, asking for an interview. I was overwhelmed, excited, terrified. This visibility was exactly what my children had feared, but it felt like a gift to me, a chance to matter again in a world that often looks past the elderly. Sophia called, her voice breathless with excitement. Grandma, you're famous. This is insane. Everyone at school is talking about you. Is that a good thing? I asked, genuinely uncertain. Are you kidding? It's amazing. My friends think you're the coolest grandmother ever, and she hesitated. I'm sorry I laughed at you before. You're better at this than most people my age. Her apology meant more than all the viral views. Thank you, dear. That means a lot. So what are you going to do now? She asked. With all this attention, it was a good question. One I hadn't considered when I'd started this journey out of spite and curiosity. What did I want from this unexpected platform? What was the purpose of my sudden visibility? I'm not sure, I admitted. But I think I'd like to use it to change how people see aging. To show that growing old doesn't mean becoming irrelevant. That's perfect, Sophia said. And maybe it could help with, the situation with Dad and Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Thomas. The situation had grown more tense. My children had been calling daily, alternating between concern and thinly veiled threats about next steps if I didn't reconsider my TikTok presence. I'd been avoiding their calls more often than not, which I knew only fueled their worry. Maybe, I said, though I doubted it. Their concerns went deeper than my social media activity. They were struggling with the fundamental challenge of seeing their parent as an autonomous individual with the right to make her own choices, even risky ones. After hanging up with Sophia, I sat in my garden thinking about purpose and platforms and family conflicts. Then I made another video, this one addressed directly to other elderly people feeling sidelined by society or their own families. They may see our wrinkles, our gray hair, our slowing steps, I said, but they don't see the fire that still burns inside us, the curiosity, the wisdom, the desire to connect and contribute. Don't let anyone, not even those who love you, convince you that your time for living boldly is over. It never is. As I posted it, I had no idea that this video would not only go viral, but would catch the attention of someone who would change the trajectory of my unexpected TikTok career and give me leverage in the growing conflict with my children. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, nearly 4 months after I'd posted my first TikTok. The subject line read, "Business opportunity, serene aging skincare." My first instinct was to delete it. Despite my growing comfort with social media, I remained wary of online scams. But something made me open it. "Dear Ms. Winters," it began, "my name is Amara Chen, Marketing Director at Serene Aging Skincare. Our brand focuses on celebrating the natural beauty of aging, rather than fighting it. And your content perfectly embodies our philosophy. We would like to discuss a potential partnership opportunity. Our initial offer would be $350,000 for a year-long collaboration, including content creation and brand ambassadorship." I read the email 3 times, certain I'd misunderstood. $350,000 for making videos about skincare? It seemed absurd, impossible. Surely this was an elaborate scam. With shaking hands, I forwarded the email to Sophia with a simple question. "Is this real?" She called me within minutes, screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Grandma, this is legit! Serene Aging is a huge brand. They're like the ethical alternative to all those anti-aging products. They're all about embracing your age instead of trying to look younger. This is perfect for you." "But the money," I said, still unable to process the figure. "That can't be right. Influencer marketing is big business, Grandma. And you've got something most influencers don't: authenticity and wisdom. Plus, your audience demographics are probably super valuable to them." My head was spinning. What should I do? First, we need to make sure it's really them. I'll help you verify the email. Then, if it's legitimate, you should absolutely take this meeting. But don't agree to anything without having someone look over the contract. The next few days were a blur. Sophia helped me confirm that the offer was genuine. We scheduled a video call with Amara and her team. I spent hours researching Serene Aging, learning about their products and philosophy, preparing questions. The meeting went surprisingly well. Amara was respectful and enthusiastic, treating me as a valuable partner rather than a novelty act. The company's ethos genuinely resonated with me, celebrating the beauty of each stage of life rather than promoting the fear of aging that had fueled the beauty industry for decades. "We don't want to change your content," Amara assured me. "We love what you're already doing. We just ask that you incorporate our products naturally into some of your videos, and perhaps create specific content about your skincare philosophy." It felt right, authentic, a partnership rather than an exploitation of my unexpected platform. With Sophia's help, I hired a lawyer who specialized in influencer contracts. She negotiated terms that protected my creative freedom while ensuring fair compensation. And then, still somewhat in disbelief, I signed the contract. $350,000, more money than I'd ever imagined having at this stage of my life. Money that could change everything. The first person I called after signing was Harold's oldest friend, Bernard, a retired financial advisor who'd helped us manage our modest savings over the years. "Jessica," he said after I'd explained the situation, "this is extraordinary. But you need to be strategic about this windfall. May I make some suggestions, please?" I said, still feeling overwhelmed by the figures we were discussing. "First, set aside a portion for taxes. This will bump you into a higher bracket. Second, consider creating a trust or updating your will to reflect this new asset. And third," his voice softened, "think about what would give you the most peace of mind and security. Peace of mind. Security." As Bernard outlined various financial options, a plan began to form in my mind. Not just for the money, but for addressing the ongoing conflict with my children. They had been increasingly insistent about my living situation, particularly since my TikTok fame had grown. Richard had even mentioned elder law attorneys in our last tense conversation, a thinly veiled threat that sent chills down my spine. I knew what that meant. They were considering legal options to control my decisions if they deemed me incapable. The irony was painful. Just as I was finding new purpose and connection, just as I was proving my competence and relevance in the digital world, my own children were questioning my capacity to manage my life. But now, with this unexpected windfall, I had resources I hadn't anticipated. Resources that could change the power dynamic. Resources that could secure my independence in ways I hadn't thought possible. I thanked Bernard for his advice and promised to consider it carefully. Then I made another call to a different kind of attorney. "I need to protect my autonomy," I explained after outlining my situation. "I need to make it clear, legally and financially, that I am capable of managing my own affairs, and I need to ensure that my wishes regarding my living situation are respected." The attorney listened carefully. "We have several options," she said. "Let's discuss them." By the end of the week, I had a comprehensive plan. I didn't share it immediately. Not with my children, not with Sophia, not even with my TikTok followers. This was a chess game now, and I needed to be strategic about my next move. Instead, I continued creating content, including my first sponsored video for Serene Aging. I spoke honestly about aging, about the changes in my skin over decades, about learning to love the face that had weathered 87 years of life. "These lines," I said, gently touching the deep creases around my eyes, "are laugh lines from decades of joy. These spots," I continued, showing the back of my hands, "are memories of summers in the garden. This softness," I touched my jawline, "is the gentle yielding of time. I don't want to erase these marks. They're the map of my life." The video resonated deeply, garnering millions of views and thousands of comments from people of all ages, thanking me for challenging beauty standards that had made them feel inadequate. Amara emailed the next day. "This is exactly why we wanted to work with you, Jessica. You've captured our philosophy perfectly. The response has been overwhelming." I felt a deep satisfaction, not just from the successful partnership, but from the knowledge that I was using this platform meaningfully, and that I now had the resources to protect the independence that allowed me to do so. The following Sunday, I invited all 3 of my children to dinner. It was time to reveal my hand in this game they didn't yet know we were playing. They arrived punctually at 5, as they always did for our infrequent family dinners. Richard with a bottle of the Merlot he knew I enjoyed, Elizabeth with a homemade pie, Thomas with nothing but his perpetual air of impatience. I greeted them warmly, determined to begin this difficult conversation from a place of love rather than resentment. The tension was palpable as we settled around the dining table, the same oak table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the decades. I'd prepared Harold's famous pot roast, a peace offering of sorts. For a while, we maintained the illusion of normalcy, discussing grandchildren and weather and neighborhood news. Finally, as I served coffee and Elizabeth's pie, Richard cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk about this TikTok situation. It's gotten out of hand." "Has it?" I asked mildly, stirring cream into my coffee. "You have millions of strangers watching you, commenting on your life. It's not safe, and frankly, it's not appropriate for someone your age." I raised an eyebrow. "What would be appropriate for someone my age, Richard?" He shifted uncomfortably. "You know what I mean. quiet activities, book clubs, senior center programs. Invisibility, I translated. Gradual withdrawal from active participation in the world. That's not fair, Elizabeth interjected. We just want you to be safe, to enjoy your remaining years without unnecessary stress or risk. My remaining years, I repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air. And who should decide how those years are spent? You or me? Thomas, never one for subtle conversation, cut to the chase. Mom, we've been talking to some experts. There are concerns about your decision-making, this sudden dive into social media, the oversharing of personal information. It suggests impaired judgment. The accusation stung, but I'd anticipated it. I see. And these experts, have any of them actually met me, evaluated me? Or are they responding to your characterization of my behavior? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I thought so, I continued. Well, as it happens, I've consulted some experts too. I rose from the table and retrieved a folder from the sideboard. These are the results of a comprehensive cognitive assessment I underwent last week. You'll find that Dr. Harriet Lynn, who is a respected geriatric neuropsychologist, has found me to be cognitively intact, with excellent judgment and decision-making capacity consistent with a highly educated individual of any age. I slid the folder toward them. Richard opened it, scanning the documents with a frown. You didn't need to do this, Elizabeth said softly. We never said you were incompetent, I finished for her. Not in those words, perhaps. But that's what you've been implying. That I'm no longer capable of managing my own life. That I need to be protected from my own choices. Thomas leaned forward. Mom, regardless of cognitive tests, there are practical concerns. This house is too big for you. The maintenance, the stairs, the yard. It's too much. And now with this online exposure, there are security concerns too. I appreciate those concerns, I said. But they don't justify taking away my autonomy. I took a deep breath, preparing for the next phase of my revelation. There's something else you should know. My TikTok presence has led to some unexpected opportunities. I've been offered, and have accepted, a brand partnership with Serene Aging Skincare. Their blank expressions might have been comical under different circumstances. It's a paid partnership, I continued. Quite well paid, in fact. $350,000 for the year. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Elizabeth's fork clattered against her plate. Thomas, for once, seemed at a loss for words. That's not possible, Richard finally managed. I assure you it is. My lawyer has reviewed the contract thoroughly. The first payment has already been deposited. I'd be happy to show you the documentation. You hired a lawyer? Elizabeth asked, her voice rising slightly. Several, actually. A contract lawyer for the brand partnership, a financial advisor for investment planning, and... I paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. An elder law attorney of my own. The shift in the room was palpable. They understood the implication immediately. With this new financial security, I continued, I've made some decisions. I'm establishing a living trust that will protect my assets and clearly outline my wishes regarding my care and living situation. I've updated my advance directives and power of attorney documents, and I've set aside funds specifically for home maintenance and in-home assistance as needed, so I can continue living independently in this house that means so much to me. I softened my tone, reaching out to touch Richard's hand. I'm not doing this to punish you. I understand that your concerns come from love. But you need to understand that taking away my choices, even with the best intentions, is not love. It's control. Mom, Elizabeth's voice wavered. We never meant to. I know, I interrupted gently. But intention and impact are different things. The impact of your actions has been to make me feel diminished, incapable, burdensome. Is that really what you want for me in my remaining years? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Of course not," Richard finally said, his voice subdued. "We want you to be happy." "Then support my choices," I said simply, "even when you don't understand them, even when they worry you. Trust that the woman who raised you, who taught for 30 years, who managed a household through good times and bad, who cared for your father through his long illness, still knows her own mind." Thomas, pragmatic as always, cut to the chase. "So you're saying you've legally protected yourself from any intervention on our part?" I met his gaze steadily. "I've legally protected my right to self-determination, yes. But what I'm hoping for isn't a legal standoff with my children. It's a reset of our relationship, a return to mutual respect." The conversation continued late into the evening. There were tears, mine and theirs. There were apologies and explanations. There were tentative steps toward understanding. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. As they prepared to leave, Richard hung back, looking troubled. "Mom, about this brand deal, are you sure they're not taking advantage of you? Using you as some kind of novelty?" I smiled, appreciating that his concern, however misplaced, came from love. "They're a business, Richard. Of course they're using me for my authentic voice, my connection with an audience, my embodiment of their brand values. And I'm using them too, for their platform, their resources, their reach. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. That's what a partnership is." He nodded slowly, a new respect dawning in his eyes. "I never thought of it that way." "There's a lot about me you haven't thought about," I said gently. "But it's not too late to start." After they left, I sat alone in my quiet house, emotionally drained but oddly peaceful. The confrontation I dreaded for months was behind me. The future remained uncertain. Relationships damaged by mistrust don't heal overnight. But for the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my children, not as a problem to be managed, not as a fragile relic to be protected, but as Jessica Winters, still very much alive, still growing, still surprising herself and others with what she was capable of. I picked up my phone and opened TikTok. "Today," I told my followers, "I had one of the hardest conversations of my life. But necessary conversations often are. Sometimes the people who love us most see us least clearly, and sometimes it takes strangers on the internet to remind our families who we really are." The comments poured in immediately. Supportive, curious, grateful. This strange new community I'd found, spanning generations and continents, held me in ways my own family was just learning to do again. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The same lined face, the same silver hair, but the eyes that looked back at me seemed different somehow. Brighter, more certain. The eyes of a woman who had reclaimed her voice and her power against all expectations, including her own. The weeks following my confrontation with my children brought a tentative new equilibrium to our relationship. Richard called more often, but his questions had shifted from thinly veiled assessments of my competence to genuine interest in my TikTok adventures. Elizabeth invited me to lunch and actually listened when I spoke. Thomas remained skeptical, but had at least stopped sending me listings for retirement communities. Meanwhile, my partnership with Serene Aging blossomed beyond my expectations. What had begun as a simple brand ambassadorship evolved into something more collaborative and creative. Amara and her team valued my input on product development, marketing strategies, and the broader conversation around aging in society. "We've never had engagement metrics like this," Amara told me during one of our weekly video calls. "Your content isn't just performing well. It's changing how our audience thinks about aging and beauty." My TikTok following continued to grow, surpassing 1 million subscribers by the 6-month mark. I expanded my content beyond aging and life wisdom to include discussions about literature, history, and social justice, drawing on my years as a professor to provide context for current events that many younger viewers found illuminating. You explain things in a way that makes sense. One commenter wrote, "My history teacher could never." The partnership with Serene Aging evolved in unexpected ways. What began as simple product endorsements became a platform for deeper conversations about aging in society. We launched a series called Wisdom Lines, where I interviewed other vibrant elders about their experiences and insights. Artists, activists, scientists, and everyday people with extraordinary stories. The series resonated powerfully, especially with younger viewers hungry for intergenerational connection in an increasingly age-segregated world. Media outlets began covering the phenomenon, with headlines like, "87-year-old TikTok star bridges generation gap," and "Jessica Winters revolutionizes how we see aging," Amara called one morning, her voice brimming with excitement. "Jessica, we've been invited to speak at the Global Beauty Innovation Summit in New York. They want us to present on changing the narrative around aging and beauty. It's a huge platform. Industry leaders, influencers, media. Would you be willing to join me on stage?" The old Jessica might have hesitated, intimidated by such a high-profile opportunity. But the woman I'd become over these months, the woman who'd stood her ground with her children, who'd built a community of millions, who'd rediscovered her voice and purpose, didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored," I said. "When is it?" "Next month. We'll arrange everything. First-class travel, luxury accommodations, a car service, and of course, we'll compensate you for the speaking engagement." After we hung up, I sat in my garden, watching bees navigate the lavender bushes Harold had planted decades ago. How strange life was. How full of unexpected turns. At an age when society expected me to quietly disappear, I was being invited to speak on a global stage. I called Sophia to share the news. Our relationship had deepened through this journey. She'd become not just a granddaughter, but a confidant and collaborator, helping me navigate the technical aspects of my digital presence, while I offered her the perspective that only decades of living can provide. "Grandma, that's amazing," she exclaimed. "We need to plan your outfit. Something iconic. Something that says, 'I'm not here to fit your expectations of elderly women.'" I laughed. I was thinking my usual cardigan and comfortable shoes. "Absolutely not. This is your moment. We're going shopping." The following weekend, Sophia arrived with a mission. We spent the day visiting boutiques I'd never have entered on my own, trying on clothes that challenged my notions of age-appropriate attire. "Fashion shouldn't have an expiration date," Sophia insisted, as she handed me a silk jumpsuit in a vibrant shade of cobalt blue. "Colors don't become off-limits just because you've had more birthdays." I emerged from the dressing room feeling simultaneously ridiculous and exhilarated. The jumpsuit skimmed my body in a way that was flattering without trying to disguise my age. The color made my silver hair look intentional rather than inevitable. "Wow," Sophia breathed. "Grandma, you look incredible." I turned to the mirror, expecting to confront an old woman playing dress-up. Instead, I saw someone vital and present, someone who had stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. "I'll take it," I told the saleswoman. "And those silver boots as well." Sophia filmed the shopping expedition for my TikTok, and the response was overwhelming. Women of all ages commented, "I've been wearing beige for a decade because I thought bright colors weren't for women of a certain age. Ordering that blue dress I've been eyeing right now. My mom hasn't worn anything but sensible clothes since she turned 60. Showing her this video immediately. Jessica is the role model I didn't know I needed at 35. I want to age like her. Unapologetically vibrant. As the summit approached, my preparation extended beyond wardrobe. I worked with Amara's team to develop our presentation, drawing on my academic background to ground our discussion in research about ageism and its impacts. I practiced using the teleprompter, mastered the art of the wireless microphone, and prepared for potential questions. The night before we left for New York, Richard came by with a gift. A leather portfolio embossed with my initials, "For your notes tomorrow," he said a bit awkwardly. I thought it might be useful. The gesture moved me deeply. It was an acknowledgement of my new professional identity, a recognition that at 87, I was still evolving, still contributing. "Thank you," I said, embracing him. "That means a lot." He hesitated, then said, "I've been watching your videos, the series with the other older people. The wisdom lines. It's really good, Mom. Important even. Coming from Richard, who had been my harshest critic. This was high praise indeed. "I'm proud of you," he added. "I didn't understand at first, but I do now. You're doing something that matters." I blinked back unexpected tears. "That means more than you know." The summit itself was a whirlwind of activity. The luxury hotel, the VIP treatment, the green room with my name on the door. All of it felt surreal, like I'd stumbled into someone else's life. But when Amara and I took the stage before an audience of industry leaders, my nerves settled. This was familiar territory. I'd spent decades in front of classrooms, engaging minds, challenging assumptions. Beauty and aging are positioned as opponents in our culture. I began, my voice strong despite my years. We're told to fight aging, to combat wrinkles, to wage war against the natural progression of time. But what if we've been asking the wrong question? What if, instead of asking how to look younger, we asked how to look more authentically, ourselves, at every age? The audience, initially polite but reserved, leaned in as I continued. I spoke about the liberation that comes with age, the freedom from the crushing beauty standards that constrain younger women. I talked about the beauty of a face that has lived fully, laughed deeply, weathered storms, and emerged resilient. When we erase age from visibility, I concluded, we erase the visual evidence of our survival. Every line on my face tells a story of a life fully lived. Why would I want to erase those stories? The standing ovation that followed was overwhelming. Journalists crowded around afterward, requesting interviews. Beauty industry executives handed me their cards, eager to continue the conversation. Social media exploded with quotes from the speech and photos of the 87-year-old TikTok sensation in cobalt blue. That night, back in my hotel room, I FaceTimed with Sophia to share the triumph. "You've started a movement, Grandma," she said, her face glowing with pride. "Do you realize that? I hadn't thought of it that way." But as I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months, from a defiant first TikTok to a keynote address at a global summit, I recognized the truth in her words. What had begun as a personal rebellion against my granddaughter's dismissal had evolved into something larger than myself. A reclamation not just of my own visibility and voice, but potentially for others like me, rendered invisible by a youth-obsessed culture. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But movements need many voices, not just one. "And that's exactly what you're creating space for," Sophia insisted. "You're holding the door open for others." After we hung up, I stood at the window of my high-rise hotel room, gazing out at the New York skyline glittering against the night sky. I thought about Harold, who had always believed in my capacity to influence and inspire. I thought about my children, gradually coming to see me anew through the eyes of strangers who valued what I had to offer. I thought about the unlikely journey that had brought me here, from a moment of hurt pride to a platform I could never have imagined. At 87, when society expected me to be winding down, I was just getting started. The realization filled me with a quiet joy and a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt since my teaching days. There was work to do, conversations to spark, minds to change, including, perhaps most importantly, my own. The impact of the summit speech rippled outward in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Media coverage extended beyond beauty and fashion's publications to mainstream news outlets. 87-year-old professor emerges as unlikely social media star and aging advocate. Read the headline in the New York Times. CNN requested an interview. The Ellen Show called. Amara was ecstatic. This is beyond anything we imagined, Jessica. You've created a cultural moment. The attention was flattering, but overwhelming. I found myself navigating a level of public scrutiny I'd never experienced during my academic career. People recognized me in restaurants, at the grocery store, even at my doctor's office. They approached with stories of their own, about their grandmothers, their mothers, their fears of aging, their gratitude for seeing someone like me visible and valued in public discourse. Through it all, I tried to maintain the authenticity that had resonated with my audience from the beginning. I declined offers that didn't align with my values. I continued creating content that felt meaningful, rather than merely popular. I spoke openly about the complexities of this late-in-life fame, the excitement and the exhaustion, the platform and the pressure. Fame at 20 must be disorienting, I told my followers. Fame at 87 is surreal. I'm navigating territory few people my age have charted. There's no manual for becoming a social media sensation when you remember a time before television. The most meaningful development, however, wasn't the public recognition, but the private reconciliation with my family. The dynamic had shifted fundamentally. My children, who had once seen me primarily through the lens of concern and obligation, now encountered daily reminders of my competence, relevance, and impact. They couldn't help but reassess their assumptions about my capabilities and needs. Richard, my most skeptical child, underwent the most dramatic transformation. He called one evening, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mom, I owe you an apology," he began. "A real one, not just for the specific things I said or did, but for how I've been seeing you these past few years." "I'm listening," I said, settling into my favorite armchair. "After Dad died, I think I started seeing you as a responsibility rather than a person. I was so focused on making sure you were safe and taken care of that I stopped seeing everything else. Your intelligence, your adaptability, your strength. I reduced you to a set of potential problems to solve." His honesty moved me deeply. "Thank you for recognizing that," I said softly. "The thing is," he continued, "I see now that it wasn't really about you at all. It was about my fear of losing you too, of failing you somehow, of not being a good enough son." "Oh, Richard," I sighed, "you've always been enough, even when you were driving me crazy with your worry." He laughed, a sound of genuine relief. "I'm proud of you, Mom, and I'm trying to learn from you. About aging, yes, but also about reinvention and courage, about not letting other people's expectations define your possibilities." These conversations, with Richard, with Elizabeth, with Thomas, began healing wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. The subtle erosion of respect, the gradual infantilization, the well-meaning but diminishing concern, all of it had taken a toll on my sense of self over the years. Now, as my children witnessed the world responding to me as a valuable, insightful, capable woman, they were forced to confront and revise their own limited vision of who I was and could be. The most unexpected relationship transformation, however, came with Sophia. My granddaughter, who had once laughed at the idea of me on TikTok, now sought my advice on her own content creation and career aspirations. Our roles had evolved into a genuine collaboration across generations. I'm thinking of focusing my senior thesis on digital media and intergenerational connection, she told me during one of our weekly strategy sessions. "Using your TikTok journey as a case study, if that's okay with you." "I'd be honored," I said, "though it feels strange to be someone's academic subject." "You've always been my subject of study, Grandma," she said with a grin. I just used to study you to figure out how to get extra cookies. Now I'm studying you to figure out how to live a meaningful life at every stage. Beyond my family, the impact extended to my broader community. The senior center, where I'd occasionally attended events, mostly to appease my children, invited me to lead a digital literacy workshop. Fellow residents in my neighborhood, who had once offered concerned glances when they saw me working in my garden alone, now approached with questions about social media and brand partnerships. Most significantly, other older adults began reaching out through TikTok comments, emails to my newly established website, even letters to my home address, which concerned me until Sophia helped me set up a P.O. box. They shared their stories of dismissal and invisibility. They expressed gratitude for seeing someone their age represented as vital and valuable. They asked for advice on finding their own voices in a world that had stopped listening. In response to this outpouring, and with serene aging support, I launched a new initiative, a digital platform called Sage Voices that provided resources, community, and technical support for older adults interested in sharing their stories and expertise online. We offered free workshops, mentorship programs, and even equipment grants for seniors with financial limitations. Everyone has something to teach, I explained in the launch video. Everyone has wisdom earned through living. The world needs these perspectives, perhaps now more than ever. The platform grew quickly, attracting participants from their 60s to their 90s, from diverse backgrounds and with varied interests. A retired engineer shared sustainable living tips. A grandmother of 12 offered conflict resolution strategies from her 40 years as a family therapist. A 92-year-old Holocaust survivor documented his experiences for future generations. Watching these elders reclaim their voices, seeing the confidence and purpose it brought to their lives, was perhaps the most rewarding aspect of my unexpected journey. I hadn't set out to start a movement, but somehow, that's what was happening. A quiet revolution against the marginalization of aging, a reclamation of visibility and value. 8 months after my first defiant TikTok video, I received an email that brought me full circle. The subject line read, "Apology and request from a humbled granddaughter. Dear Grandma Jessica," it began. "You don't know me, but my grandmother Martha knows you. Or rather, she knows your videos. She watches them every day on the account I reluctantly set up for her after months of her asking. I'm writing because I owe her an apology, and your story helped me see that. Like your granddaughter, I laughed when my grandmother wanted to join social media. I dismissed her interest as cute but misguided. I didn't take her seriously. Your videos showed her that she wasn't alone in being underestimated. They showed me that I was perpetuating harmful stereotypes about aging and capability. Martha has started her own TikTok now. She's sharing her experiences as a civil rights activist in the 1960s. She's connecting with young activists today, offering perspective and encouragement. She's found a community that values what she has to say. And it all started because you showed her it was possible. Thank you for helping me see my grandmother. Really see her. For the first time in years." I read the email through tears, then immediately opened TikTok to search for Martha's account. Her videos were exactly as her granddaughter had described. Powerful, insightful reflections on activism then and now, delivered with the gravitas of someone who had lived through pivotal, historical moments. I followed her immediately and sent a direct message. From one underestimated grandmother to another. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Thank you for sharing both. That night, I made a video reflecting on the journey of the past 8 months. I spoke about the unexpected turns life can take, even, perhaps especially, when we think we've reached the final chapter. I talked about the courage it takes to defy expectations, to remain curious and engaged when society encourages disengagement. I shared my hope that my story might inspire others to recognize that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, to reclaim your voice, to insist on being seen. My granddaughter laughed when I joined TikTok at 87. I concluded. Last week, a brand offered me $350,000. But the real value hasn't been the money or the fame. It's been the rediscovery of my own voice, the reconnection with my family on new terms, and the community we're building together. Across generations, across differences, across the digital divide. It's never too late to be heard. It's never too late to matter. It's never too late to surprise yourself and everyone else with what you're capable of becoming. As I posted the video, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unlikely journey that had begun with a moment of hurt pride and blossomed into something I could never have imagined. At 87, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving, growing, contributing in ways that felt deeply meaningful. The girl I had been at 20 could never have envisioned this chapter of my life. The woman I was at 50 wouldn't have believed it possible. Even the person I was a year ago would have dismissed it as fantasy. But here I was, living proof that life's most surprising chapters can begin at any age, if we have the courage to turn the page. 1 year after posting my first TikTok video, I celebrated my 88th birthday in a way I could never have anticipated. Serene Aging hosted an event in my honor, bringing together family, friends, and select followers for an elegant dinner at the Botanical Garden, where Harold and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons during our retirement. The setting was magical. Tables arranged among flowering plants, soft lighting illuminating pathways, the gentle sound of water features creating a peaceful backdrop for conversation. Sophia had helped plan every detail, from the menu featuring my favorite foods to the playlist that spanned the decades of my life, from Glenn Miller to Adele. My children were there, of course, along with their spouses and all 7 of my grandchildren. Richard gave a toast that brought tears to my eyes, a heartfelt acknowledgement of how his perception of me had evolved over the past year. Elizabeth had created a photo montage spanning my life, from childhood to recent TikTok fame. Even Thomas, ever practical, had contributed by ensuring that the event was professionally filmed for posterity and content. Amara and her team from Serene Aging presented me with a Crystal Award inscribed with words from my summit speech. Every line tells a story of a life fully lived. They also announced the renewal of our partnership for another year, with an increased compensation package and expanded creative control over the content we would develop together. Jessica has transformed how our brand approaches aging, Amara told the gathered guests. But more importantly, she's shifted the conversation in our industry and beyond. She's reminded us that wisdom, relevance, and beauty don't diminish with age. They evolve and deepen. The most moving moment, however, came when Sophia unveiled her surprise. A video compilation of messages from followers whose lives had been touched by my content. People of all ages, from all walks of life, sharing how my journey had inspired them. An 82-year-old woman who had started painting again after decades of believing she was too old for creative pursuits. A 35-year-old who had reconnected with her estranged grandmother after seeing my videos about intergenerational understanding. A retirement community that had revamped its programming based on the Sage Voices model, focusing on elder wisdom rather than just elder care. A 16-year-old who had interviewed her great-grandmother about her life experiences for a school project, discovering a rich history she'd never known. As the video played, I was overwhelmed by the realization that my small act of defiance had rippled outward in ways I could never have imagined. What had begun as a personal journey of reclaiming my voice had become something larger, a challenge to cultural assumptions about aging, a bridge between generations, an invitation for others to see elders as individuals with continuing value and purpose. After the formal celebration ended, my immediate family lingered in the garden. The night was warm, the stars visible above the city lights. We sat together in a circle of comfortable chairs, the conversation flowing easily in a way it hadn't for years before my TikTok adventure. "I've been thinking," Richard said during a lull in the conversation, "about what this year has taught us, taught me, about perception and potential." "Go on," I encouraged, curious about this reflective side of my usually pragmatic son. I had put you in a box labeled elderly mother. Everything I saw was filtered through that lens. Your capabilities, your desires, your future, all of it constrained by my limited vision of what was possible or appropriate for someone your age." He looked around at his siblings, who nodded in recognition of their own similar thinking. "But the world didn't see you that way," he continued. "Strangers on the internet saw you as Jessica. Insightful, funny, wise, relevant. They weren't limited by history or preconceptions. They just responded to who you are now." "It's made me wonder," Elizabeth added softly, "how many other elders we're underestimating. How many other voices we're not hearing because we've decided, consciously or not, that they no longer have anything significant to contribute." "That's exactly what Sage Voices is trying to address," I said. "Every elder has a lifetime of experience, knowledge, and perspective that deserves to be shared and valued. The platform just provides the means and the encouragement." Thomas, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "You know what impresses me most about all this, Mom? Not the followers or the brand deals or the media attention. It's your adaptability. You embraced an entirely new medium, learned new skills, navigated a new cultural landscape, all at an age when most people are resistant to even small changes." Coming from Thomas, who had been my harshest critic, this observation felt particularly meaningful. "I think that's the real lesson here," Sophia chimed in. "Age isn't what limits us. It's our assumptions about age. Both the assumptions others place on us and the ones we place on ourselves." As the conversation continued under the stars, I felt a profound sense of completion. The family conflict that had been brewing before my TikTok journey had transformed into something I hadn't dared hope for. A new foundation of mutual respect and genuine appreciation. My children no longer saw me primarily as a responsibility or a concern. They saw me as a whole person, still evolving, still contributing, still surprising them and myself with what was possible. Later that night, back home in the house I had fought to remain in, I sat in Harold's old study, now converted into my content creation space with proper lighting, a good microphone, and a comfortable chair for my arthritic back. On the wall hung framed mementos of this unexpected chapter. The New York Times article, the Summit program, the first check from Serene Aging. A copy, of course, the original had been deposited long ago. I opened my laptop to create a birthday reflection video for my followers. As I positioned myself in front of the camera, I caught my reflection in the monitor. The silver hair I'd stopped dyeing years ago. The lines that mapped decades of laughter and worry. The eyes that had witnessed nearly 9 decades of history. "Hello, friends," I began, my voice steady and warm. "Today I turned 88, and I've been reflecting on the extraordinary year that began with a moment of hurt pride and my granddaughter's laughter. What started as a small act of defiance, joining TikTok to prove I could, has blossomed into the most unexpected chapter of my life. I've learned that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, never too late to reclaim your voice, never too late to insist on being seen and heard on your own terms. A year ago, I was gradually disappearing, not physically, but in how others perceived me, and if I'm honest, in how I was beginning to perceive myself. I was becoming a category rather than a person, an elderly mother, a grandmother, a set of needs and concerns rather than possibilities and contributions. Today, I stand before you not as a novelty, the elderly TikTok star, but as Jessica Winters, 88 years young, still curious, still learning, still growing, still very much engaged with the world and its possibilities. My journey isn't remarkable because I'm exceptional. It's remarkable because it shouldn't be exceptional at all. Every elder has wisdom to share, perspectives to offer, contributions to make. If only we create the space for those voices to be heard. So as I begin my 89th year, I'm more committed than ever to expanding that space. Through sage voices, through my continued content creation, through my advocacy for elder visibility and respect. My granddaughter laughed when I joined TikTok at 87. A brand offered me $350 fun, but the true gift has been the rediscovery of my own voice and the privilege of helping others find theirs. Thank you for being part of this journey. Here's to whatever comes next. For all of us, at every age. I ended the recording and sat back in my chair, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Outside my window, the garden Harold had lovingly tended for decades was illuminated by moonlight. Inside, the house hummed with the energy of new purpose. At 88, when society expected me to be winding down, I was expanding. My influence, my connections, my sense of possibility. The future stretched before me, not as a narrowing path of decline and loss, but as an open field of potential. I couldn't know how many more years I would have. No one can. But I knew with certainty that whatever time remained would be lived fully, visibly, purposefully, not despite my age, but with the unique perspective and freedom that 8 decades of living had given me. My granddaughter had laughed when I joined TikTok at 87. Now, a year later, we were laughing together, not at limitations, but at the joy of defying them, not at the absurdity of an old woman on social media, but at the wonderful unpredictability of life at any age. As I prepared for bed that night, I thought about the girl I had been at 20, full of dreams and determination. I wished I could tell her about the journey ahead, the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges, the expected chapters, and the surprising ones. I wished I could assure her that even in her 9th decade, she would still be becoming. But perhaps it was better this way. Better to discover at each stage of life that the story continues, that new beginnings are always possible, that it's never too late to surprise yourself and everyone else with what you're capable of becoming.